grew up on Long Island in Amityville, which is on the south shore of Long Island. Actually grew up 4 houses away from the Amityville Horror House, which is a whole other story. But went to a big high school, very competitive basketball high school, and I really didn't play that much. I remember even sometimes I would I used to call it the practice pines, because sometimes during practice I wouldn't get to play. And I'd be like, Coach, can you put me in? It's practice. And he'd be like, no, this is a big practice. This is a big practice we got. And so I didn't always even get into some of the practices. And I didn't play very much, but we had a very, very good team. Actually, one of the kids on the team ended up going pro. Shelton Jones was his name, and we actually had another guy on the team who was as good as him, but robbed a White Castle and got thrown off the team. So Shelton Jones was on this team, so he was a big star in high school, and he was getting recruited. He ended up playing for St. John, and there was one game where I was in. We were probably blowing out another team, and sometimes I would get in then. And I was in, and I made a steal, and I made a steal. I'm flying down the court. There's one guy in front of me, and I took my 2 steps to the hoop way too early, like just past the 3-point line. I took my 2 steps, and the one defender who was there just stepped out of the way. And so there I am trying to make a layup from about the free throw line, and I just sort of heaved it up, and it went way high off the backboard, but luckily Shelton Jones was behind me and slammed it home, and it looked like I had tossed an alley-oop off the backboard on purpose to him. And the crowd went crazy. He was pointing at me like, great pass. And once the confusion in my head, I kind of played it up and acted like I did that on purpose. So another of my favorite sports moments didn't involve me. It was when the Phillies won the World Series in 2008. And Philly sports, we really haven't had a lot of championships. And they're just amazing. Baseball is so intense. And to win the World Series, you have to win your first matchup, your 7-game series in the divisional, and then you get to the championship series, and that's also a 7-game series, and then the World Series is a long series. So, and all the games are on late, and so you just start living in this crazy haze of a world where you're staying up every night late, and then they play so many games, and it was just so thrilling. And my kids were young. And when they finally got the last out, tears were coming down my eyes. I gave you, my son, a big hug, and I'll never forget it, because it felt like the first time I'd seen any Philly team, and I'm a Philly fan across the board, win a championship. Because growing up, we didn't have direct TV, and we didn't have football packages, and we lived in New York, so we very rarely did I even watch the Phillies play or the Eagles play. So it felt like a culmination of years of waiting to see one of my pro teams win a championship. And final out was Brad Lidge. What was so cool is that he went 48-0 as a closer, which I think set a record. I don't know if anybody that had ever gone the whole year without blowing one save. And he threw it to Carlos Ruiz, was catching at the time. And then, of course, he got the final out, a strikeout, and everybody just mobbed him. It was so, I could still see it. My next favorite memory in sports has to be the 2001 76ers. They were a great team, and I remember that year my brother was living with me here in Vermont, and we had a VHS recorder, and I would tape all the games of the regular season. And it was funny because He'd come home from Candeleros where he was working, and it would be I'd have taped it on a VHS tape on a little TV, and we watched every game that season. Sixers were great. Allen Iverson was in his prime. Pretty sure he won MVP that year. And the Sixers dominated the East, but we're going up against the Shaq and Kobe Lakers of the West. And the Lakers were huge favorites. We really didn't have a chance to even win a game in that series. And we won game one at LA. And Allen Iverson was just spectacular. He had 46 points, something like that. And he has the famous three-point shot where he makes the shot and the defender kind of falls down below him, and he just steps over him and just looks down at him like, I'm a giant and you're just an ant. And it was a huge upset. We ended up losing. They ended up winning every other game. We lost that series 4-1. But at that moment in that game, to steal game one in LA, after watching so much of that team all year, was one of my best sports experiences.